Lamborghini Huracan, one of the greatest supercars of all time. This car has had a glorious life. It's been around 10 years since Lamborghini revealed the Huracan to an adoring public, and through the course of its life, it's made a massive impact.
But 2024 marks the end. After a decade on sale, selling nearly 15,000 examples, and despite having its best ever sales year in 2023, production of the Huracan has stopped. Today, one of the finest supercars in history is dead. But who killed it, and why?
The murderer is, of course, Lamborghini itself. And the motive? Time, mostly. On the one hand, the Huracan has lived a long and fruitful life which has now run its natural course. But they had an accomplice, Mother Nature. For years, our planet has suffered at the hands of screaming, naturally aspirated V10 sports cars, and she now cries bleak tears of acid rain. The only thing that will make her smile again is the death of the Huracan and cars like it.
And that's a shame, because in spite of its age and environmental impact, the Huracan itself has been a breath of fresh air, a breath that began with another V10 mid-engine legend.
This is the Lambo Gallardo, originally built back in 2003. A lot of people think that this was the first Lamborghini built when Audi acquired the company, but actually that honor goes to its big brother, the Murcielago. This was the first entry-level Lamborghini since they ceased production of the Jalpa back in 2003. Back then, if you wanted a baby mid-engine supercar, you had to take your bum down to Maranello and order a Ferrari F430 or a 360.
Some people were afraid that the Gallardo would be too much like an Audi, that it would lack flair, but it proved the doubters wrong, and all things considered, quickly became the best Lambo ever. It had all the quality you'd expect from a car built with Audi's engineering expertise, including better materials and better reliability, but it had a big sprinkling of magic from something else.
A big old V10. These original Gallardos used a 5-litre V10 mounted right in the middle, knocking out 500 PS. And of course, the fact that it had 2 extra cylinders over the rivals made it seem extremely exotic. What's it actually like to drive? It feels like an old car, but it's still exciting. The thing that stands out for me is the steering, which is very slow compared to the Huracan. You have to really, really turn the wheel to get the car to do anything. But actually in the corners, it feels very light. The suspension's quite supple, but it's got this lovely planted stance. It just feels predictable through the bends. A little bit of understeer as you wash out. Oh, but that is glorious. What a throwback. The only downside is the gearbox. So you could actually get this with a manual, or as is the case in this particular car, the E-gear, which is basically a 6-speed robotized manual, hydraulically actuated, and it's incredibly slow to react. You can take manual control of it, and in that case, the gear changes are slow and a little bit lurchy, kind of like an Aventador, if you're familiar with that. But in automatic, it's next to useless. Leave automatic mode alone. What's it like in the tighter stuff? Doesn't slow down as well as a Huracan, I've got to say. It feels a bit lazy through those tight chicanes. And there is some understeer, but yeah, it's an old thing, but it can still throw some shapes. Woo!
The Huracan kept everything we loved about the Gallardo, its looks, ease of use, and unique mid-engine concept, but it brought a notable step up in performance, handling, and quality. Its strongest asset, however, was its diversity. Where most supercars evolve slowly, if at all, across their lifespan, the Huracan has evolved in ways that were as beautiful as they were unexpected. The LP582 rear-wheel drive model inspired the LP610-4 with all-wheel drive. Then came the iconic Performante, which itself gave way to second-generation cars including the LP644 Evo, Evo Spider, STO, Technica, and Sterato. And out of all these cars, 4 options remain.
And if you're looking for a Huracan today, then this is your obvious starting point. The Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider. They've actually gotten rid of the coupe, so now the baby Lambo is a convertible. And one of the first things you notice about it is how beautiful it is. You kind of assume that when a manufacturer thinks about getting rid of a car, one of the reasons is that it started to look a little bit stale. But no, this looks absolutely gorgeous. It's still an absolute spaceship, but what's really impressive is that it's a car you can use every single day. Jump into one of these, put it into Strada mode, and you will be shocked at how soft and supple the suspension is. Genuinely, most supercars tend to be a little bit inhospitable. Not this thing. This is actually nicer to drive than some family cars. Is the cabin getting a bit old and stale? Not really, it still looks quite fresh in here, but there are a couple of downsides. First of all, it's quite cramped, a bit compact. And also, Lamborghini, would it kill you just once to give us some cup holders in the Huracan? I know the whole creature comforts thing isn't in your vocabulary, but come on, do you know how terrifying it is to drive a 640 horsepower supercar holding the steering wheel in one hand and a cappuccino in the other? It's not on. Headroom's also quite limited, but then this is the convertible, so you drop the top and you got infinite headroom.
And the Huracan, driven by the appeal of the Evo entry-level models, has been a huge success. It's currently not the company's most popular car. That accolade falls to the Urus, selling over 6,000 in 2023. But despite its age, the Huracan isn't far behind, selling nearly 4,000 globally, more in its penultimate year than ever before.
It's easy to understand why people love it too. The heart and soul of the machine is that 5.2 litre naturally aspirated V10. And it is absolutely joyous. The power is one thing, but the character is what really defines this car. The sound, not just the volume, but the tone is breathtaking. It's so addictive. Woo! I mean, listen to the sound just echoing off these walls in the valleys. Mother Nature's gonna kill me, isn't she?
Unfortunately, that engine is part of the reason the Huracan is being discontinued. It might be the smallest car that Lamborghini make, but it has the biggest environmental impact, pumping out more CO2 than the V12-powered hybrid Revuelto and the twin-turbo V8-powered Urus. And why does any of that matter, you might ask? Well, it's all because of the EU.
By now, you've probably heard about the fact that the European Union has introduced laws that essentially force car makers to reduce their CO2 emissions. And that's not great news if your business is building screaming V10s. Luckily, Lamborghini and other small volume sports car makers have a bit more time until 2035 to sort their act out, but the clock is ticking.
Lamborghini has targeted a 40% reduction in CO2 by 2030, which it aims to achieve with the help of its new plug-in hybrid flagship, the Revuelto, alongside its first fully electric SUV, the Lanzador. Without these cars, and by sticking with the Huracan, that target would be impossible. Lamborghini, like all manufacturers who don't move towards electrification, are subject to huge fines that in this case could run into hundreds of millions of pounds every year if changes aren't made. No wonder then that the Huracan is not long for this world. It's a dinosaur, a relic, a thing of beauty, but a thing of the past that looks set to go quietly into the night.
Maybe quiet is the wrong word. As you can hear, this thing is a screamer. It's extremely vocal.
Hello, Huracan STO.
So what's the idea with this one? Well, it's the old classic, isn't it? A race car for the road. Inspired by the Super Trofeo one-make racing series, except homologatoed or homologated, so you can take it down to Tesco and back. They're so fast! Some people say it's a bit like McLaren's LT lineup or Ferrari's Pista series. What I say is that if you think of it as the maddest, lightest, angriest, most exciting Huracan you can imagine, you're on the right track, literally. It's got the most powerful engine you can get in a Huracan, 640 PS. So the acceleration is, let's say, vivid. 0 to 62 in 3 seconds flat, 193 miles an hour flat out. So life comes at you pretty damn quick in this thing, believe me. It's just so ferocious on the straights. But there's a big emphasis on cornering as well. Wow. So the downforce is way up. There's an over 50% improvement over the previous Huracan Performante. 450 kilograms of downforce at 175 miles an hour. It's got some Bridgestone Potenza race or sport tires, and the mechanical grip is sensational. We're on the sports today, and the grip is just, it's crazy. It can carry so much speed through the bends. And then there are the brakes. Brembo CCMR. I don't know what the R stands for. Really good. What it means is that you can put so much faith in the brakes. Right, I'm coming up to a big braking zone right here, and nothing is ever too late. You just stand on the pedal and it comes to a standstill, and even after lap after lap after lap, you can really pound on these. Gearbox is so quick, honestly, it just rifles up and down the box. Absolutely love the steering in this car as well. Single ratio, it's just so good.
The only problem with the STO is that with its firm suspension and racy setup, it's arguably too hardcore for the road, and with its ridiculous exhaust, too loud for almost any track day you care to take it to.
So apparently the noise limit here is 105 decibels. Let's see how loud the STO is. I've gone deaf. It's 130 decibels. Sorry.
130 decibels, in case you're wondering, is the same as a jet plane taking off, or a gunshot from close range. It's loud enough to cause instant hearing damage, and as fun as that might be, its biggest challenge of all is that the STO is finding it increasingly difficult to compete in today's world. Look at the power, 670 horses, and look at the price, £260,000, and then look at what it competes with. Flagship offerings from McLaren and Ferrari are far more powerful, less expensive, and still have room to evolve. The Huracan, by comparison, is headed to its final resting place, but it isn't going without a fight.
Talk about going out with a bang. With this, the Huracan isn't just growing old, it's growing old disgracefully. Forget making other people happy or doing what people expect of you or doing what makes sense. With this, it's all about doing whatever the hell you want. It's a bit bit like an old man inviting himself to one last party with the youngsters and just doing an absolute madness on the dance floor before heading off to that retirement home. Lamborghinis don't make much sense, but this Lamborghini makes absolutely none. It wasn't built for the road, it wasn't built to go racing, it wasn't even built for rallying. They built it for one reason, because they could.
The Starato, Italian for dirt road, came about after Lamborghini finished development of the Urus, when its engineers came to the realization that their smallest sports car, with its already capable all-wheel drive system, might make a pretty decent off-roader too. So they gave it new suspension, raising the car by 44mm, softened the dampers by 35% at the front and 25% at the rear, gave it extra underbody protection, wider bodywork, a roof snorkel to stop the engine breathing dirt, Bridgestone dualer run flats, and maddest of all, a set of LED lights that you can't even use because they're so bright they're illegal.
All of that makes the Starato look really good, but it also makes it really tough. Normally you'd come out to an environment like this in, I don't know, a hire car maybe, or some cheap old Renault or Peugeot to practice your rallying skills. It is not normal whatsoever to bring a £250,000 supercar to a place like this and just pound around. But let me tell you something, the Starato is taking it like a champ. The best thing about it is the new rally mode. Flick the switch and it turns the Starato, look at that, into an absolute drift machine. I've driven it on tarmac as well and it just wants to slide everywhere you go. But out here on the loose surface, when it slackens off the ESC, it kind of proves itself to be the most playful Lamborghini Huracan ever. It's actually quite terrifying. It might look like I'm having a lot of fun, and I am, but honestly, you should feel my heart is pounding in my chest, BPMs through the roof. And that, I think, is a sign of a brilliant car, something that excites you, engages you, and makes you really appreciate every second behind the wheel. There are tons of other cars that are exciting, obviously, but how many of those can do what the Starato is doing? Oh my God! It's a bittersweet ending. Mostly sweet because this is an absolute joy. This is mad. I could do this forever. I could drive the Huracan forever.
But, like all good things, the Huracan is headed for the end of the road. And that's as big a shame as they come, because it's delivered what almost no other supercar has come close to. Fun in more ways than anyone could possibly have predicted. On the road, on the track, on the dirt, it's forged its own path, opened our eyes to new possibilities, and throughout it all, copied nothing else. Its time may be up, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that its legendary influence will never be forgotten.